Proverbs 2. My son, if thou wilt receive my words, and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom, and apply thine heart to understanding, yea, if thou criest after knowledge, and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver, and searchest for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keepeth the paths of judgment, and preserveth the way of his saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things, who leave the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil, and delight in the frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they froward in their paths, to deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger, which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men, and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it.
Good evening. It is Wednesday, September 10th, 2014. This is your host, Mike Callahan, and welcome to the Watchman News. Amen on that. That would be Proverbs 2. that thou mayest walk in the way of good men and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it. Doesn't sound to me like a magical hand's coming down to take people to the land of paradise before all kinds of crazy things happens on the earth. I don't know. I'm having a hard time with Schofield's version of what happens, especially considering that I would trust God's word. I would trust the original scripture much more than what I would trust the ideas and the changes made by Schofield. But a lot of people don't get it. A lot of the churches don't get it. And it says it over and over and over in the Bible, and that's just one more place where it says it. You would think, if there was if there was a way all the righteous people, the good people, were going to be scooped up away from here, away from the earth, you would think that the scripture would support that. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. Oh, they pull out a few little pieces of scripture here and there and try to say, oh, well, the rapture, the rapture, the rapture. But I can show you so many more parts of scripture and bits of the Bible and other books that are not included in our Bible that totally do not support that idea. So it's up to you. Make your own decision. I just think it's wise. I think it's wisdom to read the Word yourself and to seek His Word from Him directly in your heart. And I don't think it's so wise just to jump to take man's word on something that is ultimately important. Anyway, we have tons of news tonight. Lots and lots of news. Going to start out with suspicious observers, as usual. And then after suspicious observers report, I'm going to show you something that had happened since this morning that may be a little more of a concern for us. I'm not sure, but let's go ahead and get suspicious observers out of the way. Like I say, I have a ton of news. I hope I can cover it all. Here we go.
Good morning, folks. The Iceland volcano situation has been ongoing for weeks now. We joined the monitoring back when it first went on alert, and spectacular as the lava flows are, the volcano tornado seen here in infrared is incredible. They took more earthquakes there overnight, and the potential for further activity does remain. But speaking of earthquakes, a 6-pointer rang out in Indonesia yesterday evening. It wasn't a major rumble for the area, but it was the largest of the day and had multiple aftershocks. Tremors could be found north in India and way south on the Antarctic ridge as well. So after we analyzed the M-class solar flare in CME to have an Earth-directed component yesterday, the experts have done their analyses now as well, and we can confirm that an interplanetary shockwave is expected at Earth late on September 11th or early on the 12th. Both Enlil spirals show a moderate impact, which won't be anything to worry about, but which could ramp the auroras and possibly deliver a geomagnetic storm. Solar wind is currently calm, likely to continue until that impact, as well as the low magnetic instability. Solar flaring back down into C range at this time, and the sunspots may be in the process of decay. The north certainly broke its delta candidate at the time of the solar flare, leaving some magnetic separation. Meanwhile, that delta at the south of the large trailing umbra does remain, but the active region as a whole is smaller and coming apart a bit. Gong shows openings to the coronal fields, allowing the influence of a negative southern coronal hole. The equatorial extension has some moderate power, but nothing compared to the southern core of that opening. In fact, it's hard to see anything but that darker southern portion here. All in all, calm day on our star. We wait for CME impact. Top stories. Well, we've got another polar fields update, and if the oscillation is about to swing back on a negative trend, then the north truly may not be done flipping yet. It still shows as positive, but remember the oscillations that take this up and down amidst longer-term trends for the cycle. As Mercury, Venus, and Mars end their alignment, we look forward to the next one, a geocentric opposition of Mercury and Uranus. This is super cool. So you think you know Stonehenge? Yeah, I did too, until it was revealed that the layout spans a great distance and includes newly discovered monuments that will likely prolong the mystery for years. Measurement mission showing the Arizona flood causation here, and let's use this as a jumping off point for the weather. We've got a high likelihood of tropical formation in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, actually got 2 out west. In North America, we see a strong central low, and you remember that whole pattern of eastern heat, central storm, western cold? Well, here she comes. We've got major snowfall potential for the northwest states in the coming days, and yet another night of storms as the heat and moisture race up the eastern convergence. Let's go south to a low east of Argentina, but which swings its convergence well north onto the land here and will cause major flooding imminently. Take heed in this area. Europe has the same 2 lows of note. The one atop Norway is harder to see here and actually moved eastward slightly. You can denote the counterclockwise drive to the lows and even see the convergence tail swinging south from the northern system. The storm likelihood should be no surprise when you know the pressure patterns. Same Antarctic low we saw yesterday is relevant down under again. The convergence appears to be cresting right atop Sydney. Let's get some weather shares, please. Here are our other storm zones and shots of our star to close at 6:15 a.m. Eastern Time, 3:15 a.m. here in Washington State. That's the news. Eyes open. No fear. Be safe, everyone.
Thanks again to Ben Davidson. Sorry, had a little message there. And what I wanted to show you was since then, trying to bring it up, make sure I got the right link here. I do believe I've got it right. Change my audio settings back. Now, sorry about that. So, since then, since his report this morning, we had, and I'm not quite sure what time it happened, but we had a X 1.6 class solar flare that is Earth facing. Now, I don't know if it's going to miss us to the north, to the south, of our planet, or if we're going to get hit by the brunt of it, or what. I am going to live here check the Enlil spiral and see if it's been updated, and we'll go from there. But right now, this is what the flare looks like. All the good noises, huh? So this is what the X 1.6 class flare looks like. And I'm not sure, again, if that's going to just miss us to the north of our planet or if that's going to smack us a good one. I'm not real positive. The Enlil and the other data will give us more information. If we get hit with this, it's gonna leave a mark, so to speak. So that's why I wanted to make sure I covered it tonight, even though I don't have enough information.
Don't forget to follow
to know we can always pull up the Enlil. Let's see here. Here's what we'll do real quick live. Let me believe that is how it is spelled. Sorry. I didn't want the maybe they will have the link here. on this YouTube video. I'm sorry about that. I should have had this. Ready. Probably good enough here. It's not NASA, but I'm sure it's the same data that we're going to be hit by. This is not the new one. This is not the new flare here. So, and I'm guessing we're not going to see anything as of yet. Hopefully, by morning, the data will be updated. This is the M. I believe it was a 4.2 that the enlil here shows hitting the Earth. The Earth, if you didn't know it, is the yellow, kind of greenish, yellow-greenish kind of dot right there that I'm pointing at. That would be the Earth. And that is just, believe it or not, that's an M4.2, which is still pretty strong, but nothing compared to what that X flare is. And if that gets us, like I say, it's going to leave a mark. So we'll see. We'll see. I would say make sure that you subscribe to Suspicious Observers, or at least check back with him in the morning, and he will have that information updated. And go from there. So, let's move on to the next bit of news that I have. Written by prepforSHTF.com. Nuclear war is no longer just a war of words. The Cold War is heating up. I want to remind you that Russia is one of the most powerful nuclear nations, President Putin stated. This is a reality, not just words. President Putin went on to say that Russia was ready to repel any aggression, and essentially all enemies are put on notice not to mess with nuclear Russia. Of course, many put all this blustering down as heated rhetoric, a show for the folks back home in Mother Russia watching state-run TV. The Russian government controls the media inside Russia and thus controls the message. And citizens watching needed to be reassured that they have a strong leader that will not back down from any country trying to rein them in. According to the Federation of American Scientists, Russia has the second largest stockpile of nuclear warheads in the world. 4,300 nuclear warheads is the current estimate. The United States has an estimated 4,765 nuclear warheads, the largest in the world. The fact that the United States has Russia outgunned means nothing when it comes to intent and aggression against other countries. The days of mutually assured destruction seems to be over. This is because one side, Russia, is convinced they can launch a nuclear weapon against anyone and not have retaliatory strikes follow from anyone. Russia may be convinced that they would not be destroyed if they launched a nuclear weapon against another country. And they may be right. Yes, the world as you know it would change overnight. While Russia has what most would call a relatively stable government, the same cannot be said for Iran, Pakistan, or North Korea, for example, all of which have nuclear capability or are close to it in the case of Iran. I believe in the case of North Korea as well. Mistakes happen, and in the past, this country and the world came close to a nuclear war over mistakes or misinterpreted intentions. It could happen again, and the chances have never been as great as they are right now. Suppose North Korea launches a ballistic missile, and no one knows if a nuclear warhead is attached or not. A launch of a satellite into space, North Korea might say, and yet information on hand shows it is aimed at a NATO partner, for example. According to treaties in place, other NATO allies would be required to respond militarily. What would Russia think at this point? Maybe they would become paranoid and assume they are in a perilous position and decides to take preemptive strike. It could get out of hand quickly. Countries shut off from the rest of the world because they want to deny Western influence do become paranoid and are more apt to strike out. So this could be how the world is thrust into a nuclear war. Countries that deny their citizens freedom of speech and where the press is run by the government can purposely misconstrue what is really going on in the world. Some countries routinely censor what their citizens can read and deny them internet access unless it has been scrubbed. Now, I want you to pay close attention to that paragraph, because we are as close to that as you could even imagine. You know, we have the appearance of freedom of speech in this country, and we don't have freedom of speech. We don't. If you think we do, you need to look closer at the protests going on. It's odd. They keep the people so divided that they keep the people cheering on the oppression of the other group of people. It's crazy. I watch it every day. Like, well, I'll cover a little bit more of that later with a story that I've got. Nuclear war is a danger and has been since nuclear weapons have been in existence. The threat level is higher now. However, because the United States is no longer a deterrent, according to some, the rest of the world has decided that the U.S. would sit on the sidelines. This may be the perception around the world, but one has to truly believe that if a missile were launched and the United States was the target, it would be shot down. But the question is, would we retaliate to prevent another launch? No matter where a strike occurred on American soil, your world would change. If you were in the zone, you would die instantly. If within a certain radius, you would likely die in the weeks following the strike from injuries and radiation poisoning, and those hundreds of miles away would fear another strike, and your communities and cities would descend into chaos overnight. There would not be any place to run to. Fear of another attack would be on everyone's mind, and people would attempt to flee metropolitan areas with no regard as to a destination. Even though thousands and tens of thousands would attempt to flee, they would have nowhere to go. Thousands would die from exposure and dehydration in a matter of days if they simply ran from their homes without any sort of plan in mind. This is what chaos and the possibility of another attack would do to the people. Some in the military would assume one attack as a softening blow and that others would follow. Invading armies may be coming next, may be thinking. This is not as likely, however, because why waste troops on the ground when the destruction can be accomplished by launching missiles? Of course, any country looking to take over the U.S. would have to consider the viability of the land and structures after the nuclear war. So it could be both troops on the ground in some areas and nuclear missiles to degrade our military. After all, why take over a country if the land and resources are ruined for thousands of years because of nuclear fallout? Where does all this leave you? As stated earlier, if you're in a city that is attacked with nuclear weapons, many will probably not survive, and those that do will not be able to leave due to injuries, radiation poisoning, and because of the sheer chaos. Those in other cities do not have anywhere to go either, because a missile could strike anywhere. So you could essentially be fleeing from one city to another area that may be attacked. Of course, some experts recommend you flee to the wilderness. What happens once you get there with your bug-out bag? Then what? Do you build a home, hunker down and wait for news? How do you survive in the meantime? And what about all the others that have listened and read about what the experts say? Your remote area of the world would be overrun rather quickly if everyone follows the advice. Moving a large group of people from one location to another does not solve the problem. It simply moves the problem to a new location. Studies have shown that during mass migrations caused by various reasons, people tend to migrate to where there are other people. People will follow other people. And so what you would have is a large population that has no idea how to survive off the land, as did our ancestors hundreds of years ago. You need a plan, of course, and it should not involve following others off into the great unknown. Have a plan to survive in place, because if you survive the initial attack, then you have a good head start. Obviously, if fallout is an issue, you have to leave. So if you do live on the outskirts of a large metro area, then you may need a plan to escape the fallout. But otherwise, learn to survive in place. So prepare and plan to do just that. A lot of good information in that article. A little bit of information I'm not quite so sure about. Just about any city is going to be in trouble pretty quick. And it doesn't mention the disease. It doesn't mention... There's a lot of stuff this article does fail to mention. Chaos is a great word that it used, because that is going to be so rampant that it would be unreal. And I wanted to read this article because of the heightened tensions between the countries And because of the chest beating that's going on when it comes to nuclear weapons and anti-missile technology and all that, which it's just chest beating, because I'll tell you what, there's much more that exists than what they're showing off or talking about. So it's just chest beating, and I don't understand why they're even beating their chest, because, you know, the other countries like Russia, they know at least some of the higher technology that we have that the general public as a whole has no idea about. Russia knows about that stuff. They have that kind of stuff. I really don't get who the chest beating is for. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. But I thought it was a pretty good article. I will disagree about the staying in place, depending upon where you're at and how prepared you are. But it's going to be rough. You know, if something like that happens, it's going to be rough. Sheltering in place is going to be a hard thing to do. You really better have a fortified position, because anybody that makes it past the initial grunt, you know, you have to be mindful of so many things like sounds and light and everything else. You have to look like your home is totally empty, nobody's there, and there is nothing there that anybody would want. There's a problem with that. The only way you're going to be safe is to barricade everything up good. That's going to get anybody with any amount of intelligence, that's going to get their attention. They're going to see that, and they're going to be like, I bet there's somebody in there, and I bet there's something they're protecting. So it's a double-edged sword. You know, I would agree with a lot of what they say about people following people and things like that, but I do think the wilderness is the right idea. I just think you have to be very mindful of who you go out into the wilderness with, who you add to your team, and you definitely need somebody to coordinate, and you need that person that coordinates needs other people to help coordinate, and training needs to go on. And I mean, the community is the only way to do it. Without a doubt, the only way to do it's a community. But you got to have somebody, and I hate to use the words in charge, but you have to have somebody that knows what they're doing in order to keep everything, as the word I do not mind using, coordinated, so that there can be an ongoing effort to keep things going, like food and just materials of any kind and whatnot, security, all kinds of things. Can't just go out there and just, you know, everybody in one spot try to fend for themselves. That just isn't going to work out too well for anybody. So anyway, let's get on to the news. I probably spent more time with that than I intended. So this is what I was talking about. I was referring to the freedom of speech and the loss of and all that. Demonstrators clash with police at interstate protests. And I'm not saying that this is the proper way to protest. It's probably not the best way to protest, but indeed it is a way. And again, I don't think it's really the best method, but it's been proven that it doesn't matter what they do. If they protest at all, they're going to be treated like garbage. So, and what I was getting at about the different groups of people is, okay, like on Facebook today, this particular article, I've seen a couple responses from people I know, ranging from, you know, get a life, get a job, to I can't even remember what the other one is, but it's almost like these people know everybody there, you know, and I bet they don't. The particular person that made that comment, I bet doesn't know a single one of the protesters there. How do they know what their life entails or anything else? It's just, it's crazy how we can split ourselves up into groups depending upon race or political preference or whatever. And the flag, I call it flag waving. You know, the flag waving, whether it's a blue flag or a red flag, it's got to stop, because as long as they keep the people divided, and I do want to call them foolish, as long as they keep the people divided and foolish, they'll be able to play this game back and forth. You know, they'll be able to go back and forth, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. And each time they go back and forth, they whittle a little bit more of our rights away. It's a fact. I mean, it's not that hard to go back in history and look at the laws being made and put into place, and you see it every time there's a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress. You know, these rights are whittled away, and the same's true for the Republican side, and it just goes back and forth until we have nothing. And we just let them do it, because we let them divide us. You know, some of the things don't even make no sense. You know, I mean, it's like one party will feel this way about this subject and then feel the opposite way about another subject, which leads to the same, you know, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't understand either party. I really don't. It just doesn't make sense. And I think if somebody would quit waving that flag and step back and look, I think they would see it. You know, and I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, yeah, just because I vote conservative doesn't mean that I stand for this or this. And I've heard the same from the Democratic side. And it's like, well, then stop voting that way. Stop voting that way. Start looking for a third party. Start raising your voice. Start doing something. Stop staying silent and trying to pick the quote-unquote lesser of the two evils. Because picking the lesser of two evils is still picking evil. That's all there is to it. Anyway, let me play the video here.
An interstate rush hour protest by demonstrators upset with the pace of the investigation of the shooting death of Michael Brown Jr. is taking another turn.
Yeah, police knew it was coming and kept protesters off Interstate 70. Now the protesters are rallying in Ferguson. We have team coverage with Matt Chesney outside the Ferguson PD, where protesters are gathering now, and Robin Smith near I-70 and Hanley Road in North County. We start with Matt in Ferguson.
Well, Steve, that protest that was here on South Florissant across from the Ferguson Police Department has now just disappeared after the skies opened up with some heavy rain and some lightning and thunder. The rain has let up considerably, but it was really pouring down here just about 10-15 minutes ago, and it dispersed this crowd of about 50 people that were blocking this main street through Ferguson. Take a look at some video we have shot within the last hour here in Ferguson when demonstrators who had left that planned protest along I-70 came outside to the Ferguson Police Department. It didn't take long for a group of them to decide to go out in the street and then block traffic. They blocked traffic for about 45 to 50 minutes. Missouri Highway Patrol and Ferguson Police seemed content to let the demonstrators do their demonstrating in the street, not moving in, not making an arrest from what we could see. And then Mother Nature moved in and scattered all those demonstrators out. Within the last 10 minutes or so, most of the demonstrators have gotten in their cars and either left or maybe waiting out this weather. We'll see. We'll wait to see what happens when this weather clears. But for now, this large protest here in Ferguson in front of the police department seems to have disappeared with the severe weather that moved in. Live at Ferguson, Matt Chesney, News 4.
Now, this all started with a plan to shut down I-70 at Hanley Road.
Yeah, police stopped that. Our team coverage continuing. Robin Smith has been on the scene in North County all afternoon, but right now we're having technical difficulties. But this was the scene earlier today from Sky Zoom 4 at the height of the demonstration. Dozens of St. Louis County, St. Louis City, and Missouri Highway Patrol units were lined up 2 hours before the protests were scheduled to begin. The group of protesters continued to grow. Ultimately, city police dressed in riot helmets and holding shields blocked the protesters. Then some of those demonstrating sat on the ground blocking traffic in Hanley Road. Organizers estimate that 15 were arrested. The group says their message is they want a special prosecutor named and Bob McCullough removed from the case into the investigation of the killing of Mike Brown by Officer Darren Wilson.
That we are serious about making sure that we have justice and that we are involved in the long-term strategies for success and how to rebuild our community, not only in the black community, but in terms of this entire region.
Why walk out onto an interstate?
Well, civil disobedience, as we know, going back to the civil rights movement with Dr. King and SCLC and SNCC and others, is a way to bring attention to the issues that are facing our community today.
Protesters say they did not make it onto Interstate 70 today, but they say they will return another day and move onto the interstate for their demonstration.
Yeah, see, you know, just think, today it is not your issue. What about tomorrow? What's tomorrow going to bring? I constantly talk about food prices and the rising food prices and whatnot. Be mindful of that, because they play people against each other. However, food prices is something that I think we can all agree on, unless you just got so much money that it just doesn't matter to you. But I don't think the majority of the people are in that position, because now you've got the poverty level, the poor level, which I'm not quite so sure they're different, and the middle class that are all struggling just to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. I mean, what little middle class there is, and then you have, I hate calling them wealthy people, because they're really not wealthy. They may think they're wealthy, and they may seem wealthy to a lot of us, but they're really not wealthy. They're not quite so hurt with the food prices, but let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. There's a lot more poor / poverty / middle, middle of the road people, well, for what few there are. It's going to be ugly, and it's coming quick. It's going to come really, really quick. We were warned about this a while back, and I kept saying stuff to people. I kept saying it on Facebook, and it fell on deaf ears. They've been warning for the last 2 to 3 years about food prices rising. Don't buy it when they say, because it's because of the drought, it's because of this, it's because of that. This is a planned move through and through. They know how the people are going to react. They even have a good idea when they're going to react. That's why they're playing this on up until the winter, right? Because less people feel like protesting and rioting and stuff like that when it's cold outside. Some people's not going to have a choice. I mean, well, and I say choice, rioting and protesting isn't going to put food on the table. But, what are people going to do? It's going to get ugly. I mean, you have to feed your family somehow. So I urge people to start thinking about that now. They should have started thinking about it 2 years ago when I first started really pointing it out to people. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. People are just so wrapped up into things that don't matter that what are you going to do? I mean, when people are that asleep, you can't wake them up. I don't know what to do. I am at a loss. So anyway, I want to play another video because I'm talking about people that are asleep and really don't get it and really don't understand. So I want to play a little 3-minute video of proof of that. This is the problem in this country.
Today is Friday, September 5th, and we are on GW's campus, and we have been interviewing students about current event topics and the anniversary of 9/11 next week. So you'll see a series of interviews with different students here on campus as to their knowledge on different current events. So next week marks an anniversary of a major national event. Do you know what that is?
Next week? No.
March on Watchman. Thanksgiving? No, it's September 11th. So next week marks the anniversary of a major national event. Do you know what that is? Next week is September 11th, right? Yes. Yep. So 9/11 happened 13 years ago. And oh my God, I didn't realize what it is. I know, that's crazy. Yeah. So are you guys aware of ISIS? Do you know what it is? And did you know that they're responsible for beheading 2 American journalists? Could you name one of the journalists?
Foley, right?
James Foley and Stephen Sotloff.
Yeah.
It starts with a J, right?
I know this.
It starts with a J.
Yeah,
One of them,
it?
yes.
One of them? John, I'm just going to guess John. I saw on CNN that they were just showing the video, but I forget.
Yeah.
It was just subtitles.
Oh God, I know one named Steven something. I literally just said an article.
Stephen Sotloff and James Foley. Could you name one of the journalists?
I couldn't give a name on the journalist.
Have you heard about ISIS at all? Do you know what it is? So have you heard about 2 American journalists being beheaded? No. Maybe... no. No. So I'm sure that you've heard of ISIS. Do you know what the president's strategy is in dealing with that?
I don't.
Okay.
I haven't heard of ISIS.
Okay. So ISIS is a group of radical Islamists. They're terrorists operating.
No, I haven't. Okay.
All right. two American journalists. Yeah, so two American journalists were being held captive in Syria, and they beheaded two of them, and it became national news, and they sent a message out. Yeah. So we're just asking if students knew the names of the two journalists. And do you know what the president's strategy is for dealing with ISIS? I know. That's a big question. I don't think he has one. Would you be able to name one celebrity involved in the Nude hacking photo scandal? Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Lawrence. Get up there. Ariana Grande. Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah.
All right. Favorite?
Quite telling, isn't it? It's crazy. It's crazy. That's what we're worried about. We're worried about celebrities. We're worried about entertainment. We're worried about sports. You know, and I'm not quite sure, you know, I'm not jumping on the journalists got beheaded bandwagon. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary that, you know, those videos aren't quite what they're made to look like. But whatever the case may be, it shows how much entertainment, how much, well, that don't really talk about sports, but that's up there in the same category. How much entertainment and sports weigh in with the people versus what's really going on in the world, what we really need to be paying attention to, and what our real threats are. I'm telling you, it's not a threat if we don't see this season of The Walking Dead. It's not a threat. Nobody's going to die from it. You know, I mean, there might be a few tears, but we're going to live. We can make it through that. But if there is a nuclear or a biological or a chemical weapon set off in a major city, that might be a little bit different story. We've got a southern border that's just wide open for any of these people to be able to just walk right in. But we're not worried about that. We're worried about entertainment. We're worried about sports. Worried about the new iPhone 6 that's coming out. It finally has the same options as Android. Oh, it cracks me up. It cracks me up. But they'll sell lots of them, don't worry, because it's the thing to do. Cracks me up. So anyway, we were talking about our southern border and whatnot. So let me read through this real quick. U.S. confirms ISIL planning infiltration of U.S. southern border. Well, look at that. Following a publication of Taylor's remarks, a DHS spokesperson contacted the Free Beacon to clarify his comments about the exact threat ISIL poses to the southern border. There is no credible intelligence to suggest that there is an active plot by ISIL to attempt to cross the southern border, the DHS spokesperson said. A senior Homeland Security official confirmed to Congress on Wednesday that militants associated with the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant are planning to enter the United States via the porous southern border. Francis Taylor, Undersecretary for Intelligence and Analysis at DHS, told senators during a hearing that ISIL supporters are known to be plotting ways to infiltrate the United States through the border. They don't have to plan a way. You got some car keys? You got shoes? You can make it, buddy. There have been Twitter, social media exchanges among ISIL adherents across the globe speaking about that as a possibility, Taylor told Senator John McCain in response to a question about recent reports on Twitter and Facebook of messages that would urge infiltration into the U.S. across their southwestern border. Certainly any infiltration across our border would be a threat, Taylor said, explaining the border security agents are working to tighten measures that would prevent this from taking place. I'm satisfied we have the intelligence and the capability on our border that would prevent the activity, Taylor said. However, McCain was dubious, referring to recent videos released by activist James O'Keefe showing him crossing the border while wearing an Osama bin Laden mask. I'm going back up to that intelligence thing. And you know, we've got all kinds of drones ready to go to spy on the American people. We've got all this stuff, all these satellites are using, everything, all this technology they're using, the cell phone, the fake cell phone tower technology and everything else, and we cannot secure the border. How can anybody not be saying, are you serious? Are you really, really serious? How can anybody miss this? Oh, that's right. There's a nude celebrity scandal going on. There's a football player that beat up his girlfriend or his wife or whatever. And I'm not saying that should be ignored or, you know, but there's a place for that, and it's not at all of our dinner tables. It's not. You know, legal things need to be done to be dealt with this football player or whatever, you know. Whatever, but it should not be the topic. The topic at our dinner table should be, what should we do to prepare? We should be talking about our plans. We should, you know, and of course you can't do that every single night and stuff like that, but the problem is it's not being done at all. So I'm just giving you an idea. The link's in the About tab. You can read all that if you want. You know, a lot of this stuff, it seems like I'm beating a dead horse. You know, it really does. But what else can you do? This is the important things. So let's talk about what the Department of Homeland Security is worried about, right? DHS forced to watch customers' buying habits for terrorist clues. Here's a clue. Don't let them in here. Cracks me up. I'm trying to stop this video before it starts. Yay, I did it. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson said his department will be issuing new guidelines to retailers this week, giving them pointers on how to spot potential terrorists among their customers by looking at what they're buying. While saying the government cannot prohibit the sales of some everyday materials, Mr. Johnson said retailers should be trained to look for anyone who buys a lot from what he described as a long list of materials that can be used as explosive precursors. He said it was an extension of the If You See Something, Say Something campaign launched by his predecessor, former Secretary Janet Napolitano, which tries to enlist average Americans to be aware of their immediate environment. We can't and we shouldn't prohibit the sale of a pressure cooker. We can sensitize retail business to be on guard for suspicious behavior by those who buy this kind of stuff, Mr. Johnson said during a question and answer session after his speech at the Council on Foreign Relations. Other than pressure cookers, Mr. Johnson did not say what other products might appear on the guidance that will be sent to retailers. Mr. Johnson, and you can...
Well, good afternoon.
Sorry about that. And you can bet Walmart's going to be at the top of that list. Mr. Johnson said he is aware of the tenuous balance, I guess that's tenuous, between security and freedom and does not want to upset it with his moves. One moment. He also said there is no current credible information indicating that Islamic State militants who are on the advance in Iraq and Syria are plotting an immediate attacks in the U.S., but watch them pressure cookers, right? He said, though, that they're a potential long-term threat, particularly given a number of foreign fighters from countries that have a visa waiver privileges from the U.S. He said the government should be looking for patterns in someone's travel or purchasing that raise questions, particularly if they are buying what here called explosive precursors. The Boston Marathon bombers used pressure cookers to create crude, improvised explosive devices. The prospect had been considered by Homeland Security officials as far back as a decade ago, when the department issued a bulletin warning of the home appliance's potential use as a terrorist device. If you could see me, I'm face palming, right? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. it's like banning guns, right? Somebody's just going to use a baseball bat or a knife or a hammer or a stick. A stick. Sticks are still legal, right? They're still plentiful. My goodness. A rock? A pencil. Scissors, screwdriver. Come on. Let's get real. Let me tell you what is on that list that they didn't talk about. Food. Food. Anybody buying large amounts of food. They're not looking for terrorists. They're looking for people that are preparing to be able to deal with a national emergency. A quote-unquote national emergency. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for people buying pressure cookers. They're not. Let me tell you what else would work. Just as good as a pressure cooker. A steel pipe. Right? Steel pipe. Especially a thick 1/4 inch wall steel pipe. Yeah. That would probably do a better. See, you have to understand the physics behind an explosive device. The tighter, how do you say this? I didn't plan on teaching an explosives 101 class, but the tougher the material is, right? The harder the material is, the thicker it is, the harder it would be to blow apart, the more of a boom you're going to have when you do blow it up. I hope that makes sense. I didn't think about this, or didn't know I was going to say anything like this, so I didn't pick out the proper wording. But yeah, so, you know, if you use something like 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch steel thick pipe with some nice thick pipe caps, you know, possibly, I don't want to go any further with that. I don't want to get in trouble. But, you know, my point is pressure cooker is by far from the most dangerous, or the most readily available, or the most inexpensive. Pardon me, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's annoying. It's actually annoying. I'm using that word, annoying. There we go. So I've been talking, going on with some other news. I've been talking about this race issue, and it, you know, I'm not saying there's not racism. I'm not backing away from that or all that, but you see it constantly. You know, you can see it constantly, white on black, or police against black people, or whatever. And I have told about issues to where police came to quote unquote help a situation with a distraught teenager, and it's usually white. It's usually white males. That's the issue. And I ran across this story today. Pardon me, I'm sorry. Federal civil lawsuit was filed today against the San Mateo County and a deputy on behalf of the family of a mentally ill 18-year-old Yanira Serrano, who was fatally shot by a county sheriff's deputy outside the family home on June 3rd. In the newly released 9/11 tape, her brother is heard requesting medical help, as Serrano was schizophrenic and off of her medications. He is heard in the tape stating that it was not an emergency. Within minutes, Deputy Min Drew arrived. Lorenzo Serrano was still on the phone with 911 as the gunshot rang out, despite dispatch stating paramedics were en route. It's disgusting, and the link's down in the About tab. I'm not going to read it all. We've got like 6 minutes left to the show, and I've got plenty of stuff to cover. But yeah, I mean, the link's down in the About tab. So it's not just young unarmed black people. It's not even just mentally distraught young white people, or young white males, I should say. It's also mentally distraught young white females. And I'm sure, you know, the thing is, we got to quit fighting this race thing and going back. Pardon me. Wow, I'm sorry. We got to quit fighting this race thing and going back and forth, and because we're not getting anywhere, we're not solving any problems. All we're doing is staying at each other's throats and getting absolutely nothing done. Absolutely nothing. So here's an example of why we should be able to keep firearms. I believe there's a short video with this. Maybe. Yep, there he is. As soon as it loads, there you
It
go.
was around 6 o'clock this morning when IMPD officers actually across the street, that's their West headquarters, they were out having roll call and they heard a bunch of gunshots and came running over here to the Chase Bank parking lot where they found one man dead, and they say a man who says he was the shooter, he says he was being robbed, had his arms up and surrendered. And we did, when we got here, see a man get put into handcuffs and put into a squad car. Also out here on the scene is a truck who we're told is the victim's truck, was up running, went on its own, rammed up into the Kroger, and the back window of that truck has been shot out. So there is a lot of information that police are trying to piece together here. We talked to a neighbor earlier. He lives in the apartment complex across the street. He says he heard multiple shots. Take a listen to what he has to say.
I know it's a semi-automatic weapon and stuff because I served in the military for 10 years, so basically I know what gunshots sound like, and it was like about at least 12 of them.
And there are a lot of evidence markers out here on the scene. Lots of investigating still happening here. The Marion County prosecutor, Denise Robinson, has been out here on scene talking to detectives. And any new information that we get, of course, we'll bring it to you. IMPD says if you know anything about this, we're in the 500 block of King Street. You need to call them right away. Reporting live, Lindy Thaxton, Fox 59 News.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, good citizen, an armed good citizen, stopped something that could have been worse. I don't know what to say. I'm getting so frustrated with the anti-gun movement because they are totally detached from reality. And it's been proven over and over and over, the more people that carry firearms, it does not turn into the Wild West. It doesn't turn into the Wild West. Here's a little bit of a different story. Pretty free from InfoWars. Links down in the About tab. Army officer barred from wearing offensive uniform at daughter's high school. A 24-year U.S. Army officer was denied entry into his daughter's high school because his uniform may offend another student, according to the school's security. After trying to escort his daughter into the Rochester Adams High School in Rochester, Michigan, Lieutenant Colonel Sherwood Baker was told by security that if he wanted to enter the school, he would have to go home and change out of his uniform. Before he was allowed in, the security guard stopped him and said, "Sorry, you're not allowed in the school." Baker's wife, Rachel Ferhadson, told My Fox Detroit, security told him men and women in uniform weren't allowed because it may offend another student. This school superintendent, however, was quick to apologize to the family. Man, I am sorry. Wow. Man, the district has apologized for any perception that individuals in uniform are not welcome in the school. Superintendent Robert Shaner said himself, the veteran's road. I have no idea why I'm coughing. The district does not have policy excluding individuals in uniform and will be working with administration and a firm that handles our security to make sure district policies are understood and communicated accurately. But the fact that the incident occurred in the first place is indicative to a trend to disrespect active, current, and former military in America. Wow. I have no idea why I'm coughing, and I do apologize. So anyway, I wanted to point this story out, because this is ridiculous. I don't agree with all the wars. Hell, I don't agree with most of the wars. I don't agree with violence to that level. I mean, come on. I mean, you have to protect yourself. Again, I'm a staunch Second Amendment supporter. You have to have the ability to protect yourself, and I support troops and all that. I don't support all the bogus wars for the global banking cartel and big businesses and all that good stuff. I don't support that, but I do support the troops. I support any man or woman that is brave enough to sign their life, literally their life, on a dotted line and put up with that crap. And I apologize for my use of wording, but that's exactly what it is. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Deport these kind of people. That's the only thing I could say. Deport them. Get them out of the country. If they're so offended by the men and women to protect our country, quote unquote, and quote unquote protect our freedoms, then they need to be deported somewhere else that they're not protected. It's that simple. Maybe they can respect them. I don't know. This whole politically correct thing is really bringing this country to its knees. It's very, very sad. We don't have rights anymore. Not even close. Here's a story that I thought was touching, and I believe there's a video. Maybe I can play the video, clear my throat during it. And I believe I've got one more story after this. But I thought this was rather touching.
Truly heartbreaking story here tonight. This elderly couple, who had been together for more than 60 years, was found dead yesterday inside their home at Lake Wylie.
Investigators say that Dave Moulter died trying to give his wife Corinne CPR, giving his wife his last breath. Eyewitness News reporter Greg Suskin found out their enduring relationship set an example for others.
Brandy Williams broke down, talking about losing a couple she called best friends.
Just wonderful people. I've never met anybody like that in my life.
Williams was the caregiver for Dave and Corinne Moulter. She had advanced Alzheimer's, and he waited on her hand and foot. Williams helped them 3 days a week.
Just being there and seeing it from all eyes is just true love like no other. It's the kind you see in movies, not the kind you see in real life.
They lived on a quiet road, away from commotion, but not from their neighbors. Elkie Hall would see Corinne out walking, her husband not far behind her.
She would walk down the street, and he would follow her, from way back so she wouldn't know that he's following her.
Investigators believe Moulter died while trying to do CPR on his wife. His body was found next to hers in their home. She was 83, he was 84. Williams found them when she showed up at the house.
I just want to know that they didn't struggle. I just want to know they didn't struggle.
Moulter was a member of the Steel Creek Masonic Lodge. He brought his wife to meetings because he couldn't leave her. Ray Moxley says their deaths together are somehow right.
It's almost fitting, I guess, that the two of them are going to be together forever.
To Williams, the loss is devastating, but she finds joy in one thing.
I'm glad they're together, and I know that you wouldn't want it any other way.
In Lake Wylie, Greg Suskin, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Now, the coroner told Greg that no autopsies are planned because there was nothing suspicious at the house and foul play is not suspected. We put this story on our Facebook page where you can see pictures and also leave your comments.
That's the way it's supposed to be. When two people choose to be together and they take those vows, a lot of people these days see it as a legal contract, and that's about it. And that's not what it's supposed to be at all. I don't remember in biblical days them talking about legal contracts. I don't remember them talking about going to the county courthouse to get a marriage license. It almost seems that's all that marriage is today, is paperwork. And it's not supposed to be. But hey, that takes two people. It takes two people. Obviously, one can't do it alone. So anyway, the last story I have kind of goes the opposite direction of that. It's a story by RT. And single Americans become majority for the first time. This is sad. This is sad news. More people in the United States are apparently leaving wedding rings sitting in jewelry stores, as a new data shows the majority of American adults are now single. Specifically, about 50.2% of American adults over the age of 16, roughly 126.6 million people, were single in August, according to a new Bureau of Labor Statistics cited by Bloomberg. This marks the first time that single Americans make up the majority of the adult population since the government began tracking the data 38 years ago. In 1976, single Americans made up 37.4% of the adult population. The number of individuals who have never been married also rose to 30.4%, up notably from 22.1% more than 3 decades ago. Divorced Americans, meanwhile, now compose 19.8% of the population compared to 15.3% in 1976. As these numbers continue to rise, economist Edward Yardeni said the development will have significant ripple effects for the economic, social, and political scenes in the United States. That's the idea behind it. According to Yardeni, who penned a letter to clients on Tuesday, single Americans as a group generally prefer to rent housing rather than own it outright, and they are less likely to have children. These trends mean that changes in spending will also be on the way. Although single Americans were not yet the majority in 2012, a report by Fortune at the time had already started documenting some of the changes, noting that so-called singletons were contributing close to $2 trillion to the U.S. economy every year. And you can go on and read the rest of the article, but here's the thing. The whole idea is they are trying to destroy the family unit, and the reason why they're trying to destroy the family unit because it destroys the entire society. It really does. You make people more dependent on the government because the household now has one income instead of 2 incomes, which makes it extremely hard on the household, if there's children involved, on the household with 1 income that has children, it makes that extremely hard. And then, and that's typically the female that gets the children, so then the male gets slammed with child support, right? And then, typically, most men, including myself, try to move on and be with somebody else. And what if they have more children with that other person that they're with? They can't even support their family that they're with because they're too busy making these outrageous payments in a lot of cases. You know, and then, again, talk about division, you know, they try to keep people to fight. It's crazy. Here's a tip. I agree that some divorces need to happen, but most don't. Most need 2 people to grow up. It's that simple. Most marriages just need 2 people to grow up. When they decided to take that step into marriage, they should have decided to leave all the selfishness back with it, back at their bachelor party, their bachelorette party, or whatever. If they didn't have one, they should have left that then. It's ridiculous. People are falling for it, man. That this government is just attacking our Achilles heel with method after method after method, and people are falling for it. They're falling for it. It's sad. You know, they're going to bring this country down one way or another. They don't need an invading force. We invaded ourselves. We really, really did. We can turn it around to an extent, but it is going to get much uglier before it gets better. There's no 2 ways about that. Even if we, as a whole in this country, decide that, no, we want better than this, we have some hard times coming. I just hope that the people as a whole make that decision. They got to turn the TV off first. They got to quit playing with their toys. They got to start talking to one another. And not with memes on Facebook, but real talk. That's what I got for you tonight. A lot of news. But I'll be back tomorrow night with more news. I think I'm going to probably having a very enjoyable weekend. I don't think I'm going to even look at the news this weekend. I'm going to try not to look at the news this weekend. Anyway, that's what I've got. May God bless you all. May He walk with you. Be one with your spirit. I love you all. I really, really do. I hope we can turn this around. Y'all have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow night.